Hey there, Jake here from CVP. Sony announced the BURANO all the way back in September of 2023, and this week they have finally released version 2 firmware for it, which brings a huge range of updates, making this already great camera even better. The BURANO already had quite a large range of different scan modes, codec, resolution and frame rate combinations, but with version 2 Sony has added 3 new scan modes: full frame crop 3.8K 16:9, Super 35 4.3K 4:3, and Super 35 1.9K 16:9. This video has been edited and rendered in 4K UHD through Premiere Pro. Please note the scale percentages in our graphics to show you how much we are scaling the different resolution files across our testing. The Super 35 4.3K mode, which is limited to just shooting in X-OCN LT, will be great for those wanting to use 2x anamorphic Super 35 lenses with the BURANO, and you'll get roughly a 2.66:1 aspect ratio when you do in this format. The full frame crop 3.8K and Super 35 1.9K modes have been added to give users the option to capture smaller 4K or 1.9K files versus the full frame 6 or 8K modes and the Super 35 4 or 5.8K modes, while still having close to the same full frame or Super 35 angle of view, faster sensor readout speeds, and higher maximum frame rates compared to the higher resolution modes. These modes do crop in slightly more compared to their higher resolution options, but let's take a look at how well these actually perform. The 3.8K mode can record in XAVC-I or L and X-OCN LT. The Super 35 4.3K 4:3 is limited to just X-OCN LT, and the 1.9K mode is limited to just XAVC-I or L. For these readout speed tests, we are using our own in-house measuring tool and software so we can give you some numbers and compare them to other cameras we've measured before. We can see that in the camera's full frame 8.6K mode we get a readout of roughly 18.9 milliseconds, and in the full frame crop 6K 16:9 mode it's roughly 16.8 milliseconds. The full frame 3.8K mode is much faster at 6.68 milliseconds, which is quick, but not as quick as the 1.9K mode. This mode is actually so fast, it's too fast for our regular methodology, which maxes out at around 3.3 milliseconds. So we adjusted our methodology and got a result of roughly 2.2 milliseconds. Looking at some pans in this new mode, we can see just how much less rolling shutter jello effect we get compared to the ones with the higher readout speeds. These new modes will be really good for fast moving scenes, and then when you can deal with the faster readout, you have the lovely 8K image this camera can capture. However, the trade-off with these new modes is that you do lose detail versus their high resolution counterparts. If we take a look at our focus chart, which is a real stress test for cameras, we can see that comparing the different scan modes, there is a clear difference in resolving power between the different scan modes, with the 8.6K unsurprisingly being the most detailed, and the 3.8K having the least. This is a similar story with the 1.9K mode, which again compared to the other Super 35 modes, does look the least detailed. Both of these new modes show aliasing on our chart, while the higher resolution counterparts are clean and very detailed. But like I said, this is a stress test for cameras, and whether you see aliasing or not will depend on the content you're capturing. I also wanted to compare this new full frame 3.8K mode to the Super 35 4K mode, so I used the Sony 2870 f2 to reframe, as it's a pretty excellent zoom lens across its range. The Super 35 4K has clearer chroma noise as you are using less physical size of the sensor, but I think it does look a little bit more detailed compared to the full frame 3.8K. Let's have a quick look at a few more real world situations to see how these new modes hold up. We managed to shoot some really quick headshots of Sam outside and also this beautiful fence, which has lots of lovely detail around it. Looking across the different modes, we can see a clear difference in resolution. This is most noticeable when we pixel peep looking at Sam's beard, and then if we scale in all the way into the shots of the fence outside. Sony has listened to user feedback around the readout speed of the BURANO and has now given users the option to shoot with faster readouts in these new modes. But as always, there are trade-offs, so the loss in resolving power has to happen to get these faster readouts. If you're planning on grabbing a BURANO or renting one for your next project, you'll need to weigh up what balance of resolution and readout speed fits with whatever shot or production you are using it on. The BURANO's image is really detailed in the 8.6, 5.8 and 4.3K modes, but if the rolling shutter is too much for you, you at least have the option to go into these new scan modes and get the faster readout speeds. Another big update in the version 2 firmware is the tweaks to the slow and quick modes, and the new high frame rates with the new scan modes. Sony has made a nice chart which shows the updated frame rates for each format. Other than the new formats, it's the Super 35 4K crop mode in both X-OCN and XAVC that has seen its frame rates change, with the loads of additions up to its 120 frames per second maximum. With the 3 new scan modes, you can shoot full frame crop 3.8K 16:9 up to 120 frames per second, Super 35 4.3K 4:3 up to 60 frames per second, and Super 35 1.9K 16:9 up to 240 frames per second. It's really good you now have the option to record in 3.8K 120 and Full HD 240, as previously the camera was limited to 30 in 8.6K, 60 in 6K and 5.8K, and 120 in Super 35 crop 4K. Though, as with our resolution testing, the slow motion doesn't look as detailed as the other modes. But it's at least helpful that you have the option now if you need some slow motion in a pinch. When shooting at 240 frames in the 1.9K mode, the SDI and HDMI outputs are not available. With these new modes, Sony have also added the ability to set your base frame rate to 24p when recording in X-OCN when using a 16:9 aspect ratio. This means 24p is available across all X-OCN formats now, but is limited still when shooting in some XAVC formats. Up next, a 1.8x Desqueeze has been added. There are quite a few 1.8x anamorphic lenses on the market, such as cooked full frame lenses, a bunch of lower cost options, and the Caldwell chameleons. With this new addition, you can now choose from 1.3, 1.5, 1.8, and 2x Desqueezes in camera, which is a really nice range to choose from depending on what lenses you are wanting to use and what delivery aspect ratio you are aiming for. Next, PL stabilisation can now be set to high, and steady shot can be set to active when in the full frame 6K and Super 35 1.9K 16:9 modes. Here's some quick examples of using them on and off. The low mode when using PL glass is similar to regular steady shot stabilisation with E-mount lenses. It doesn't really crop at all. High or active with E-mount lenses then does crop into the image to provide digital stabilisation. It does look pretty good though, but you do lose a good chunk of field of view. It's great that you now have this option though, as it's been present in some of Sony's other cinema line cameras before. Another change in the release notes is that autofocus performance should be improved when the system frequency is set to 29.97, 25, 24 and 23.98. I've asked Sony to clarify on this, and they've let me know that it means that even though your camera frequency is set to the listed frequencies, the autofocus is being processed at 60 frames per second, which should improve performance. The Burano already had an excellent autofocus system, and I can't see a massive change from the limited testing that we've managed with the very short time we've had with this firmware. But hopefully, Burano users see an increase in performance when running this new firmware. One of the biggest series of updates for the Burano has to be some of the refinements to the external output options. First off, when recording in XAVC, the camera status and settings can now be displayed on the SDI output. This was something I know frustrated a few users, so it's great to see it changed. The display layout of the camera status and settings for external output video has also been improved. The text is now around the image instead of being overlaid, which is a great change. 23.98 PSF support has been added to the SDI output formats. A full HD monitor output format has been added when recording in X-OCN. Timecode and clip name metadata has been added to SDI output when recording in X-OCN. And lastly, external output image quality when the base look input is set to S-Log3 has been improved. In the update, there's also a bunch of smaller changes as well. This includes the following. A high low key function has been added to check for blown out highlights in high luminance or high key areas and blocked out shadows in low luminance or low key areas. This was a function that has been present in older Sony cameras like the FS7, F55 and even the F65, and it effectively allows you to check your highlights and shadows by adjusting the brightness of your image while keeping your LUT enabled. Next, 5 white balance memory positions have been added. A gamma display assist function has been added that displays the LCD monitor at 709 equivalent when the base look is set to S-Log3 in Cine mode. Breathing compensation and image stabilization information has been added to the metadata when recording in X-OCN. A new base look has been added, 709 tone, which other cinema line cameras like the FX3 and FR7 also have. This is what it looks like versus a Cinetone. Proxy recording is now supported when the system frequency is set to 24. File data saved in internal memory, such as passwords and user 3D LUTs, can now be reset together with the menu settings by executing reset to factory defaults in the maintenance menu. Iris control, zoom control, and focus control is now supported on the PL lens interface. And a bunch more, just hit pause and give them a read if you want. Since we last spoke about the Burano, it's actually had a bit of a price drop. As of the 4th of June in 2025, the Burano is now just over £21,000 excluding any VAT. Have you used the Burano before? Let us know what you think of it down below. Our demo Buranos are up to date and available to get your hands on now. If you want to come in and test the camera out for yourself, you can book an appointment at our UK and European showrooms where you can get your hands on and test a range of cameras, rig them up and check out some lenses with one of our very knowledgeable technical consultants. If you want to book an appointment, drop demo@cvp.com and email. Anyway, let us know if you have any other questions about this new firmware for the Burano in the comments below. And if you like the video, please give it a like and maybe consider subscribing so you don't miss out on our awesome upcoming content. And thank you so much for watching.